How the fudge has TF2 reached its peak player count 14 years after it launched? In June 2021, TF2 broke its concurrent player record, reaching over 151,000 players. Even some news outlets were talking about it. So is TF2 increasing in popularity, or do we just have 50,000 bot accounts running amok? Now, most player graphs have this shape: one early spike as the game launches, then regular smaller spikes as the game tries to desperately cling on to life with regular updates, and then you get the long tail into oblivion. And this is where the game is declared dead by the internet. The TF2 graph, however, has a lovely spike as normal, and then it stabilises, climbing to another peak of 100k in 2015, but generally it's been cruising at around 70k players for most of its life, rarely dropping below the top 10 most popular games on Steam, as people like to say. But then we get this kind of slow and steady growth again after its lowest point in 2019, where there was a kind of turning point where we gradually climbed back up to an all-time high 2 days after the summer 2021 update. So what's going on? I have to say, I have felt a little bit skeptical about this figure in the past. It's hard to believe that this could be accurate when during some periods of the day you can find servers like this. And when teamwork.tf shows figures like these. And when you just take a look at the list of community servers, it just doesn't seem to quite add up sometimes. Not that I think Valve would intentionally inflate or skew their numbers, I just thought that something else might be going on. But the more I looked into it, the less clear things became. So what does concurrent players on Steam charts mean? There are many ways to measure how many people are playing a game. Some games like Overwatch measure MAU, monthly active users, and the active user here doesn't have a clear definition. It could be you've opened the menu at least one time during that month. Minecraft, for instance, boasts almost 150 million active users, but only a fraction of that would actually be playing the game at any given moment. The TF2 Steam chart shows the number of concurrent players for each game on Steam. A player being someone who has at least opened the game to the main menu. So the first thing to note is that if just opening the main menu is recorded, then this might inflate the numbers. But on the other hand, recording concurrent players as opposed to active players could give a deceptively small number. And this is because, let's say we check how many people are playing twice during the day. The first hour we see 50k players, and the second hour we also see 50k players. This could be 100k unique active users in 2 hours, but the average concurrent player count would show 50k players. Measuring this way will still show general trends, but it doesn't always give you an accurate indication of the total number of people playing a game. So the first thing I did is compare the Steam chart figure with what we see on teamwork.tf. And when I first saw these figures, I thought, Jeebus Crust. Teamwork.tf only states about 15k concurrent players, and this is on a Saturday afternoon in the UK. So does this mean there are tens of thousands of people chilling in the menu or tabbed out? I mean, sure, it's the kind of game where you might do that. You may spend 30 minutes editing your loadouts or arranging your backpack, but I don't think 50,000 people are doing this. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is probably just only counting players in casual servers as opposed to community servers, and this might seem reasonable, but when you look through the server browser and just take a glance over the numbers, there just doesn't seem to be enough people to make up that other 50 odd K. So this is where things get confusing. But if anyone watching knows the mystery as to why teamwork.tf shows such a low figure, then I'd love to know, and I will pin your comment immediately upon seeing it. The next thing I wanted to do was take a look at Steam Spy, which is a service you can sign up for, and it uses an API to the Steam software distribution service to get a reasonably accurate estimate for game usage and ownership on Steam. Firstly, we can see how many unique players there are over a 2-week period, and apparently it counts players in game servers, not just in the menu. And this says that approximately 1 to 5% of TF2 owners are playing the game every 2 weeks. Steam Spy also says there are a total of 54 million TF2 owners, which is pretty mad. That's quite a lot of human beings. So taking 2.5 as like an average, this is the equivalent of 1.35 million unique players in the game every 2 weeks. What the actual fudge? There was supposedly a 2-week period within the last year where 4.7 million people were playing TF2. That's a tad more than I expected. What's going on? This site also gives daily concurrent players which fluctuate a lot, but normally it's between 70 to 140k concurrent players. So this piece of data at least seems to correspond with the Steam chart, but it still seems like an awful lot of people, which is, amazing as long as it's true. The final thing I looked at briefly were the stats for Twitch streams, which loosely reflect the overall recent growth in TF2. Although there's obviously a very small viewership of the game on Twitch, there are typically a few hundred people watching TF2 on Twitch, and again it's things like this that just cause me to be a little bit skeptical. Another obvious line of inquiry is bots. Are half of these numbers bots? Well, firstly, what bots do you mean? We have trading bots, item farming bots, and of course the let's ruin the enjoyment for lots of people for no reason sadist bots. And I could even imagine that all these combined could run into the thousands quite easily. And maybe there are still people running idle farms in a virtual machine for metal, but I still find it hard to believe that they make up the majority of these player numbers we see. Valve News Network mentioned in a video recently that a guy called Mastercoms wrote a program that led him to believe that about 30k of these concurrent players could be idle or bot accounts, which in itself is pretty mental, but only brings the concurrent player count down to say 40 to 100k, which is still pretty darn good. Finally, we can also look at TF2 content on YouTube that gets a continued interest and viewership, and there are still plenty of new channels starting up and growing all the time. Some of these viewers will of course be people who don't necessarily play the game anymore, but the growth of new channels suggests to me that there are also new people coming to TF2. But that's not the end of the story. I wish it was. I happened to glance at the average playtime on Steam Spy, and I saw something very strange. Easily 25% of players supposedly are staying in the game for a minute or less. And if we take 10 minutes as the absolute minimum to play a game of TF2, then over half of these players or entities are not playing TF2 at all. This is what a typical playtime graph should look like, a cluster of data points around the 1 to 2 hour mark. But TF2 isn't alone here. I noticed a few games share this anomaly. Either people are visiting the game for a very short amount of time, or these are tons and tons of bot accounts of some kind. And if this is true, how has nobody spoken about this before? It's kind of insane, but maybe I'm reading this wrong, maybe I'm missing something, maybe Steam Spy itself is messed up, because the data on how many people are playing is based on people in actual servers. So I would have assumed that this data is also from people in actual servers, and surely trading bots just need to chill out on the menu. I have no idea what's going on. My brain hurts. Please send help. Although the total number of players is debatable and kind of confusing, I think the recent growth we have seen is still real. Sure, there may be 40k bots or a chunk of data that isn't quite what we think, but whatever that is, the gradual increase in players over time I think reflects real growth. And although unusual, a revival in player numbers like this is not completely unheard of. For example, look at DayZ coming back from the dead after several years of stagnation where I was certain it was going to die forever. Interestingly, CSGO follows a similar path, a very slow, steady growth over many years. Rainbow Six Siege, it tells a similar story, but over much less time of course. And GTA 5 is another good example of late growth, with the game starting off at around 50k concurrent players and now going strong at about 200k. Perhaps playing old games is becoming more accepted these days. I mean, there are many games like World of Warcraft and Minecraft that definitely show that to be the case, but I wanted to take a moment to have a think about some of the reasons we could be seeing growth in TF2. The update we got just before the all-time high in June was pretty average, and although it mentioned a fix for the bots, which may have brought a few players back in, I think it's still fair to say that it hasn't really got anything to do with that long-term steady growth at least. So I reckon this trend is down to these 4 main reasons. There are more people playing video games overall. It's a really good game and a timeless masterpiece, which is still enjoyable to this day. It's free and it works on a potato. Firstly, the games industry is growing as a whole, and over 10 years that's quite a hefty difference in player numbers. But this alone doesn't stop games dying, but the fact that it's a really good game that's very easy to jump into casually, as well as offering plenty of depth for more competitive players, as well as for those hat enthusiasts, means it's already in a pretty good position. But I think the real key to what we've seen is the fact that it's a completely free game and it's not too demanding when it comes to hardware, which opens it up to a much bigger worldwide audience. So, you know, if you live in a third world country like France, like up north, like insert a country that you think would make this a funny joke, it's still accessible to you. All these things feed into each other, of course, and sure, there might be other factors like some bigger streamers bringing people back into the game, and the attention from the press probably didn't do it any harm either, despite most of it being largely negative. I think just at the end of the day, it's just a really good free game. But I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. I would be more than happy to make a 10-minute video which is just a love letter to TF2, explaining why it's such a timeless masterpiece with impossibly high skill ceilings, endless humour, countless ways to enjoy, full of charm and depth that is rarely seen in modern games. But this video is already too long. It's also interesting to see that so many people own the game, so maybe there is a constant stream of players coming back in to play for nostalgic reasons or just to relax. I think TF2 is kind of sentimental for many people. Some just like being part of the TF2 world, be it just as an artist, an animator, or someone who likes to jump into the game. To me, it feels like a rite of passage for FPS game enthusiasts growing up. Everyone's got to try TF2 at least once, and it seems to be that there are still players who get the bug and stick around. For me, the game is comparable to the likes of CSGO and Minecraft, timeless classics where the age of them no longer has that negative effect as it does with other games. But I guess compared to some of these other big monstrous games, it does have kind of a small community, but boy is this game resilient. The fact that people are still playing this game and watching TF2 content despite the embarrassing state it seems to be in half the time. The fact that TF2 YouTubers can even exist, let alone get 100k or even 1 million views on a video 14 years after its launch is kind of mind-blowing. And there's also really good new upcoming channels appearing all the time too. So when will TF2 die? One day I'm sure it will see a gradual slow decline again, but apparently there's still some more growth in it left. I mean, if it keeps on going like this, based on my calculations, I think it'll be the biggest game on Steam in the year 2031. But at the end of the day, player numbers don't really matter. I mean, there are plenty enough people to enjoy the game with, and plenty of people are still watching TF2 content. I know this video raised as many questions as it answered, so if anyone has any insights, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Sorry about the slow videos recently, but I'll hopefully see you again very soon. Probably at Christmas. Lol, 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 lol. Love you.